Across the United States, there are places where time seems to have stopped. Entire towns that once held thousands of people now sit silent and empty. Streets that once carried wagons, cars, and footsteps are now cracked and covered in weeds. Houses that once held families now stand abandoned. Windows are broken, roofs sag, and paint slowly fades under years of rain and snow. Trees grow through sidewalks, and vines climb the walls of buildings that were once full of life. Nature slowly begins reclaiming everything that people built. These places are known as ghost towns. When most people imagine ghost towns, they think of dusty settlements somewhere in the American West. They imagine wooden saloons, empty dirt roads, and wind-blowing sand across deserted streets. But some of the most fascinating ghost towns in America are not in deserts at all. Many of them are hidden deep in the forests and hills of Pennsylvania. At first glance, Pennsylvania might not seem like the type of place where ghost towns would exist. The state is known for large cities, farmland, rivers, and mountains covered with thick forests. Yet beneath those forests lies a long industrial history that created hundreds of towns that eventually disappeared. For more than a century, Pennsylvania was one of the most important industrial regions in the United States. Massive coal deposits beneath the ground powered factories across the country. Steel mills produced materials that built bridges, railroads, ships, and skyscrapers. Rail lines stretched across the state, connecting small towns with major cities and shipping ports. The demand for workers was enormous. Thousands of immigrants arrived from Europe hoping to build better lives for their families. Entire communities appeared almost overnight near coal mines, lumber camps, railroads, and oil fields. Life in these towns could be difficult, but they were full of activity and opportunity. Workers spent long days in mines or mills, while families built homes and neighborhoods around those industries. Schools were built for children. Churches became gathering places where communities celebrated holidays and supported one another during difficult times. Local stores sold food, clothing, and tools. Train stations connected even the smallest towns to the outside world. For many decades, these communities thrived. People believed their towns would exist for generations. But industries rarely last forever. Coal seams eventually run out. Forests are cut down and cannot supply timber forever. Oil wells stop producing, factories close when markets change, or technology evolves. When the jobs disappear, the people who depended on those jobs must move somewhere else. Over time, houses become empty and businesses shut their doors. Schools close because there are no children left to teach. Streets become quiet and eventually fall into disrepair. In some cases, the towns slowly shrink until only a few residents remain. In other cases, the entire population leaves and the town becomes completely abandoned. One of the most famous examples of this transformation is the town of Centralia. For many decades, Centralia was a normal coal mining community. Families built homes there, and miners worked underground extracting coal that helped power the industrial growth of the United States. The town had churches, schools, and small businesses. Residents knew one another, and many families lived there for generations. It seemed like a stable place where life would continue for many years. Everything changed in 1962 when a fire started in a landfill located near an abandoned mine entrance. Fires in trash dumps were not unusual, and local officials initially believed the flames could be put out quickly. Unfortunately, the fire reached a coal seam that connected to a vast network of old mining tunnels beneath the town. Once the coal underground caught fire, the situation became extremely difficult to control. Coal fires can burn for decades because the fuel lies deep beneath the surface where it is difficult to reach. At first, the fire moved slowly through the underground tunnels. Many residents did not realize how serious the situation had become. But as time passed, strange and dangerous things began happening. Cracks appeared in the ground as the burning coal weakened the earth above it. Toxic gases began escaping from underground openings. In some places, steam rose from the soil, creating an eerie landscape where smoke drifted from the ground. Engineers tried several different methods to stop the fire. They attempted to dig trenches and fill tunnels to block the flames. Each attempt failed because the fire had already spread too far through the maze of underground passages. As the years passed, the dangers became impossible to ignore. The ground sometimes collapsed without warning. One well-known incident involved a young boy who nearly fell into a sudden sinkhole that opened beneath his feet in a backyard. The hole released hot steam and poisonous gases from the burning coal below. Events like this convinced many residents that staying in the town was no longer safe. Eventually, government officials offered to buy the homes of residents so they could relocate. Families who had lived there for generations were forced to leave the community they loved. Houses were demolished and entire neighborhoods disappeared. Today, only a handful of residents remain in Centralia, and the underground fire continues to burn beneath the ground. Another Pennsylvania town experienced a completely different type of disappearance. In the 19th century, oil became one of the most valuable resources in the world. When large oil deposits were discovered in Pennsylvania during the 1960s, thousands of people rushed to the region hoping to become rich. One of the towns that emerged during this period was Pithole. The growth of this town was astonishing. Within only a few months, thousands of workers, investors, and merchants arrived to participate in the booming oil industry. Hotels were built quickly to house visitors and workers. Businesses opened along newly created streets. The town even had theaters, banks, and newspapers. At its peak, the population reached tens of thousands of people. Wagons carrying equipment and supplies filled the roads. The sound of drilling rigs and construction echoed throughout the valley. People believed they were witnessing the birth of a permanent and prosperous city. But the boom did not last. The oil wells began to dry out. Investors lost interest and workers moved on to other opportunities. Businesses that depended on the oil industry closed when their customers disappeared. The population shrank rapidly. Buildings that once housed crowded hotels and stores were abandoned. Within only a few years, the town that had once been full of life nearly vanished from the map. Another small town that eventually faded away was LeQuin. This town existed primarily to support a large lumber operation deep in the mountains. Workers lived in company housing while trains transported massive logs down the slopes to sawmills. For several years, the town was busy with activity as lumber was harvested from the surrounding forests. But once the forests were cut down, the lumber companies moved on. Without timber, there were no jobs, and without jobs, the town had no future. Residents packed their belongings and followed the industry to new regions where fresh forests waited to be harvested. Some towns disappeared because of major government projects. The quiet farming community of Alvira was transformed during the Second World War when the United States government needed land for a large munitions facility. Residents were asked to leave their homes so the land could be used to support wartime production. Farms and houses were cleared and hundreds of concrete bunkers were constructed to store explosives. After the war, the facility eventually closed, but many of the bunkers remained scattered throughout the forest, standing quietly among the trees. Another town vanished beneath water after engineers constructed a dam to control flooding. The town of Livermore once existed along the Conemaugh River, where coal mining and railroads supported local families. When the dam was built, the valley slowly filled with water, creating the reservoir known as Conemaugh River Lake. Today, the remains of the town rest beneath the surface of that lake. Across the forests and mountains of Pennsylvania, many more forgotten towns still exist. Some are hidden beneath thick vegetation, while others remain visible as scattered foundations and crumbling buildings. Explorers who search for these places often rely on historical maps and stories passed down through local communities. Occasionally, hikers discover unexpected clues such as old wells, rusted machinery, or stone walls marking where homes once stood. Standing in a ghost town can feel like stepping into a different era. The quiet landscape allows the imagination to fill in the missing details. It's easy to picture wagons traveling along dirt roads or children playing near schoolhouses while smoke rises from chimneys during cold winters. The people who once lived in these towns built communities filled with hope and determination. They worked long hours in mines, mills, and forests to provide better lives for their families. Over time, the industries that supported those towns changed or disappeared. New technologies replaced old methods of production. Resources were exhausted or markets shifted to different regions. As people moved away, the town slowly faded into the landscape. Today, the forests of Pennsylvania continue to grow over those forgotten places. Roads vanish beneath grass and trees, buildings collapse and return to the soil. Yet the stories of those communities remain part of the larger history of the United States. They remind us how quickly human settlements can rise and fall, and how closely our lives are connected to the industries and resources around us. Even though many of these towns have disappeared, their stories continue to capture the imagination. Travelers, historians, and filmmakers are drawn to the mystery of places where entire communities once existed. Each ghost town is like a doorway into the past, revealing the lives of people who worked hard, faced challenges, and built towns that seemed permanent. Hidden among the quiet hills and forests of Pennsylvania, those forgotten towns are still waiting to be remembered. Their streets may be gone and their houses may have fallen, but the echoes of the people who lived there remain woven into the landscape, reminding us that history is never truly lost as long as someone continues to tell the story.